Okay, welcome everybody. Happy Advent. Hopefully you had a good week off last week and enjoyed Thanksgiving and all the wonderful things that are involved with that. And now we're well into the season of Advent already, because obviously it's 4 weeks, but because of just how things fall, it's actually less than that, this year. So we're already pretty well into the season. So very excited for that. And couple announcements. One is, and this is something we can talk about when we want to do it, but last year we had the Christmas cookie Bible study, which was great. So everybody basically brought Christmas cookies, and it was wonderful. So I'm looking at the calendar, if we want maybe do that in two, so the next week's the 11th, that's the 18th, and then the week after that is Christmas. So actually it's 3 weeks to the day until Christmas. So do we want to do it on the 18th? Does that sound like a plan? Okay. So 18th will be the Christmas cookie. So if you have any Christmas cookies, you can bring them. If you don't, you can just enjoy them. We had so many last time. So
2 weeks to find them.
Exactly.
Bake them.
Yeah, bake them or whatever. I can get my mom to bake some for me or something like that. So that's good. Oh, yes. That is June 26th. Yeah. So it's end of June, exactly. So still a little time. That'll be my 4th, which is pretty cool. So other announcement, a week from Friday, so December 13th, I'm doing the ORTV Mass. So if anybody's interested, it's 10 a.m. live Mass. I always, extend the invitation to the Bible study people. So if you're interested, let me know. Peter and Laura usually come, but they can't because Peter has important things going on, so Laura has important stuff going on. Harriet's you're gonna come. Okay.
I'll do it for you.
You want to come, Pat? Okay, great.
I got notice. I can.
Great. I'll if I remember, I'll send you an email to remind you, because I have to send an email. But anybody else is more than welcome to come if you're interested. It is December 13th, and if you're interested, exactly. So it's a Friday, 10 a.m. If you're interested, just let me know. Send me an email or something. I can give you the details. Basically, it's over in Prospect, is where the studio is. But you probably most of you probably seen the Mass, but it's the one that's televised on my TV9 or whatever it is every day, and it gets a lot of viewers. A lot of people are watching it. So it's always nice to have people from people from our community to represent. So if you're interested, let me know. So that's December 13th. Another announcement, 2 other announcements at least, probably more. Scapulars. Do we want to do that? Do we want to do it next week, you think? Or, okay, and what I'll do is I'll put it in my calendar so I remember. But basically...
We may pick up a few more people.
Yeah, last week we had talked about, 2 weeks ago, we had talked about scapulars and what those are. I'll give a little more of a catechesis about what it is. But essentially, basically, it's a we call them devotional scapulars as opposed to monastic scapulars. So people that are in monastic life and religious life, like monks and nuns, they wear a large scapular. Scapular just comes from the word for shoulder, so it's a long cloth that goes over their shoulders and goes all the way down the front and then all the way down the back. It's a very long piece of cloth. A devotional scapular is basically a version of the scapular that lay people can wear that's much smaller, so it's not as large, but it's a way of, and you have one there. So it's worn.
Put it on so I wouldn't forget.
That's great. That's good. Yeah. And it's very much a part of the tradition for centuries, going all the way back basically to like late antiquity. And it's a way of lay people, even if you're not in religious life, it's a way for us or for you to participate in what religious life is about by wearing this, by marking yourself with that garment. And there's different types of scapulars, there's many different. It's like there's dozens of different types and colors and everything. Probably the most well-known one is the brown, scapular. And each one is associated with different, there's, a little bit of a different history and different things. But with the brown scapular, there are promises associated with it, which we'll talk about, which are amazing. And there's also expectations of the people who wear them, which we'll talk about as well. Basically, it comes down to wearing it, and then also some different kinds of prayers and different options. Basically, we'll talk about that. And then also the person is instituted into essentially the order of the scapular, right? So the person is invested with the scapular in a special prayer by a priest. So we could do that on So this is great. So we have next week is Scapular Week. The week after that is Christmas Cookie Week. Then it's Christmas. It's just like we're building up. So we have, some people have scapulars here.
This one, is this one, this is green.
Yeah, so there's also the green scapular. This is a good like little show and tell. There's also a green scapular. So we might have different options, if you want to choose different. But there's a show down here too.
But you don't, that's not the only one you need to be invested in.
Exactly. So
that's the distinction.
exactly. So
Yes.
so these so the other ones, that's a brown one right there. So obviously you can.
What's better to wear, does it matter?
So I mean, it's the you can look up, and this is something we'll talk about next week. There's some differences of some of the ones that aren't the brown scapular are associated, like for instance, with certain saints or certain religious orders. So sometimes if people have a devotion to that, they'll wear it.
Okay.
But probably the most common one, and the one that kind of has the most sort of ritual associated with it, is the brown scapular. So, but yes, we will talk about that next time. We have a number of people who have some that they've brought, but what I'll do is I have a number of them that are at the rectory, so I can bring them. Yes? Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so essentially the promise with the brown scapular is that, the one who is wearing it, our Blessed Lady, promises that the person, those who faithfully wear and are faithful to what's asked of the person who wears it, which which we'll talk about next time, can be assured that they'll enter into heaven, and that even as we talked about, I think in a past class, even if someone's destined for heaven, you still probably will go to purgatory first. So she says not only will you be destined for heaven, but also that your purgatory will be shorter, basically. So so it's a really
17, the
special.
Saturday thereafter.
Exactly.
That's pretty impressive.
Exactly. Yeah.
That alone.
Yes.
Makes it worth wearing.
Exactly.
Well, I was in the third order of Carmelite.
Oh, yes.
Like sister order, and then when you took your your semi-final, whatever promises, they would give you a scapular that was something in between.
Exactly.
It was.
Yeah, but that's their best
Like
thing.
big, like a bed.
Yes.
And then when you took your final promises, it was embroidered. I think.
Exactly. So yeah, that's a perfect example of so that distinction between like the monastic scapular and the devotional scapular. So those who are in a third order kind of it's another level, let's say, of participation in a religious order, to the point that you're not quite wearing the full habit, obviously, but you are wearing like almost the full scapular as a way of showing that you are, part of that, you're part of that order, right?
In the
a
Dominican
tertiary
order, the scapular is the same that is worn by all the religious. It's the full.
Hmm. And we have our lay Dominicans wear that here for different. You've probably seen them wearing that.
There are only
Yeah.
very minimal circumstances where you're permitted to wear
it, yeah.
To be buried in it, that's the key.
That's very, very nice. Yeah. And we have.
Yeah, you wouldn't because.
Oh, Joyce just commented in. This is another announcement. Actually, Joyce, if you're listening still, Joyce is doing the pageant, the Christmas pageant after Christmas here, and they're looking for people to do it. She says we still need wise men and shepherds. And actually, Joyce, there's somebody at the mass today who is going to be a wise man, so you're all set with at least one. So email me about that, and then it's weird to talk to her through a live stream, but email me about it, and I got you at least one wise man. I could probably get a couple others too. So last announcement, at least that I have, unless anybody else has an announcement, is maybe you've seen we're doing a parish pilgrimage to Rome, October 19th through the 29th of next year. Next year is also the Jubilee, this year is the Jubilee year, which maybe you've heard of, but basically 2025 years since the birth of Christ. So normally every 25 years from that year is, normally speaking, a Jubilee year, which just means a special year of celebration the whole year. So obviously we started the year already, the liturgical year, because it just started last Sunday and with Advent. So it's a special year when there's special graces and indulgences, things like that. And also it's a year in which people are encouraged to make pilgrimages to the holy sites, particularly Rome and the Holy Land, Jerusalem. So we're doing the pilgrimage to Rome. It's going to be a little crazy because the whole year I love Rome. I lived in Rome for 5 years, so I could, obviously know it very well, but it's going to be a little crazy in a Jubilee year. So even in the fall, that's actually going to be a big time. So if you're interested, October 19th through the 29th, and if you go on our bulletin, you can find how to, get the information about it. Basically, you're going to email the email to send to your interest to is macdi64@gmail.com. macdi64@gmail.com. I feel like I'm on WJMJ having to reread the macdi64@gmail.com. And MacNeill, you might know MacNeill. She's the one who's kind of coordinating the interest. So if you're interested, we'd be happy to have you. So.
Do you have a price for it yet or not?
We don't yet. She's working on that. She's got some things together in terms of from the practical standpoint, like in terms of transportation and all that kind of thing. But I think, partly she's going to kind of gauge interest too. That's kind of what the level is. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interest, but so.
Is there a lot of walking in this trip?
That's a great question. So we do have a bus that's going to be available to us, every day. That's going to take us to the various places. So I mean, there will be. It's not like we're going to be, walking across the city to get somewhere. Like whenever, we're going to have at least 5 days in Rome. So when we're going like to a different part of the city, the bus will take us there. When we get to the site, there will be some walking. Obviously, like especially even some of these basilicas are big, so it's walking around. But it's not as if the expectation is not going to be that people have to walk, across the city or anything like that.
It's the pavers I'm concerned about.
Yeah.
And the roads.
The San Pietrini, those little stones, yeah. Yeah.
They are.
Yeah. So that's why we will have exactly, yeah. So we will have the bus to kind of assist with that, yeah.
So the itinerary is to be forthcoming as well.
So yeah,
You
we're
said 5 in Rome, which means you must be
5 in Rome, 2 in Assisi, and 2 in Florence is what we're looking at. And I was just talking with the guy Francesco who serves the Mass on Wednesdays. He's from Gaeta, which is just south of Rome, and it's the city where kind of a fun historical moment when Pius IX, the Pope, when the Italian basically government was unifying and kicking out the Pope from Rome, he went undercover because they were worried about for his life, basically. So he was undercover. He dressed up as a simple priest and went undercover to Gaeta and stayed there because Gaeta was part of, even though it's close to Rome, it was under the king of south of Italy who was very pro-Pope and very pro-Catholic. So the Pope actually lived in Gaeta for some time, and he had a palace there and everything. So this guy lives here, Francesco. He's going to be there in October. So he said, because probably one of the days of the 5 days in Rome will be an open day, a free day to do whatever you want. So we might also offer a day trip to there to see that site, which would be cool. So yes, so there'll be a papal audience. We'll be part of the, won't be like we're, right up next to him, sitting with him, but I know I don't have any. Exactly. Everybody asks me whenever they go there. I was like, "Can you get me?" I'm like, "No, I can't do that."
from the Pope.
I do have a. Yeah, I won't mention who it is, but I do have kind of a. I don't want to call it a connection because that makes it seem very like.
That's what you're going to do on your day off.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where I can't push it too much. I can't. I gotta.
That was so nice. That was wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll have the audience. Also, granted that things are, because the Pope normally has Wednesday audience, but sometimes he's sick or things happen. So, but yeah, there is one scheduled. So, but yeah, you get to see all the places where I get to take you through the American Seminary where I lived for 3 years, and you get to see all the seminarians there. Get to see where they're studying, and some of the more not just like the big sites of Rome, but like also some of the more get to see the sisters. What's that?
And the favorite restaurant.
Yes. Oh, the best restaurants. To take the best. Yeah, we're only gonna do the best. Only the best restaurants. Yeah, exactly. And the Franciscan Sisters, if people are familiar with the Meriden Franciscan Sisters, their community is there. So we'll visit with them, and
I'm in.
there you go. Yeah.
I've never been. I was invited several times.
Oh, okay.
My biggest, now that I look back, disappointment in myself was I had a chance to meet John Paul II.
Wow.
But I was teaching, and if you know anything about being in a public school teacher, you can't just say, "Hey, I'm going away for a week."
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It was in the middle of the school year. But I often wish that I had lied to go there and sing.
To meet the Pope.
He's somebody I'm really sorry I didn't meet. And he came right up to the sisters. Well, several of them worked there.
in Vatican City.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, at least two. but,
They still do, yeah. They work. So there's four now, and they work in one of them is basically
Sacred
very
Heart
high.
nuns are there too.
Sacred Heart nuns, yep. We'll probably go there if we can. We'll definitely go to for instance, the Apostles of the Sacred Heart are right near St. John Lateran. That's also not too difficult to. Exactly, yeah. You got a good memory, Harriet.
Yeah.
Remember all that stuff. So yeah, we'll do that. We'll see the tomb of St. John Paul II. So hopefully maybe we can even have mass in there, which would be great. So yeah.
Do you know if the next Jubilee year will be in 2050, or if they'll be doing something in 2033?
I imagine they might do something in 2033. I'm sure at least it will be a holy year, like they'll do, because the Pope can call holy years at any time. Like, there was a year of mercy, if you remember, a couple of years ago. There was a year of St. Paul that Pope Benedict had back in 2007, 2008. So I wouldn't be surprised if they at least make it a holy year of redemption, of the redemption, this being a holy year of the Nativity. So yeah, Moira?
Well, what is the significance of 33?
So Jesus' age at the time of his,
Okay.
So it being the year of, not just, so this would be the anniversary of his birth year, and that would be the anniversary of redemption, of the cross, resurrection, all that kind of thing. Yeah, so it could definitely be, was there, yeah.
Is there also a 50-year, like Jubilee, but only like on steroids?
So normally, so for instance, like the 2000, because think of every 25 years, but then when it comes to the 50 mark, or when it comes to the 100 mark, like the year 2000 was sort of even more, I mean, it was still the same Jubilee, but it was kind of had more sort of pomp around it because, it's kind of a larger milestone. But yeah, this is, in terms of what this offers, let's say, for one who makes a pilgrimage to the holy doors and things like that, it's the same promises, which is great, just similar to the scapular too. So it's a great.
I know in the Jewish community, the 50-year ones, you return everything to their original owner. Isn't this based off of that?
Yes, yeah. So if you want to go back and read the Old Testament, maybe we'll do that one of the weeks. We'll just go back and read, like in Leviticus, is the prescriptions about, because Leviticus gives the prescriptions about everything, right? The law, and one of the things in there is about the years of Jubilee, which, yes, very, precisely in that time, during that entire year, it was a time of basically, releasing of prisoners, releasing of debts to those who were in debt to someone. Actually, there was a prescription in there by which if somebody was in debt, that their closest relative was called upon to actually give the person what they would need to free them from that debt. So that was all to happen during the Jubilee year. And also people wouldn't, either for the entirety or for large parts of it, wouldn't actually work. They wouldn't do menial labor or even raising crops, and they would simply live off of what had been saved up. So it was a time of also, it was sort of like a big, like the Sabbath day, but extended to an entire year, if you can imagine that. So the year of, rejoicing, celebration, but also a year of works of mercy, again, releasing the prisoners, releasing people from debts, and sort of celebrating that Sabbath for a whole year. So we're kind of doing that in a certain sense. Obviously not, completely. We're not going to all take off for work for a year, but in terms of, in the spiritual sense, right, that there's these graces that are open to us that are freeing us from spiritual burdens during this time. Yeah.
What's the significance, Father, when Jesus went to Nazareth and he proclaimed from the scroll,
Yeah.
"This is the year I announced you." Did that have anything to do with the Jubilee?
Yes, in a certain sense. So when the prophet is speaking of, and this comes up like in all of the, in the prophetic books that we're reading, like right now we're in Isaiah at this point in first week in Advent. But as we're going through Advent, we're reading from all the prophecies, and you'll notice a lot of them speak in language that's similar to this. Like they're saying this is the time of favor, this is the year of favor, right? So they're speaking in language that, because essentially the reason for the Jubilee was, again, just what the reason for the entire Jewish religion was, to prepare people for the coming of the Messiah. So when they're having these Jubilees, these Sabbaths, it's a time of rest, a time of replenishment to prepare them for the Messiah that's to come. So what the prophets are basically saying is when the Messiah does come, it's almost as if it's like the whole Jubilee for the, like, the age of Jubilee in a certain sense, which is the age of Christ, right? Which is why we also don't necessarily have to, again, like St. Paul says, we're not bound by Leviticus's law, so like we don't have to celebrate the Jubilee in exactly the way that Leviticus says, partly because we are living in a time of Jubilee, essentially, when we can be released of our spiritual burdens whenever we want to, right, in the sacraments and confession, all that kind of thing. But at the same time, we do have these special times, these special years when we kind of, call that to mind in a special way. But there definitely that language is reminiscent of the Jubilee.
I'm sorry, are you saying sort of that after the resurrection that this entire period is like a Jubilee waiting for the second coming?
Yeah, that we're in this new age of sort of similar to what Jesus says, about when he's being asked by the scribes and the Pharisees about this new age, right? There's all this language about the new age, and even John used that language of age, right? This new age, that we're in this new age, this new period in which of the redemption, right? In which now we have access to God in a way that no one ever has had up until this point, right? That we in the sacraments, right, in the Eucharist. I mean, think about just how amazing it is to say that we have total access to God in the Eucharist, right? Meaning we can, so long as we're in a state of grace, we can go to the Eucharist whenever we want. We can receive God fully. We can go to confession whenever we need to be, put into a state of grace. Like, we have an access to God that is way higher than any people, including the chosen people, right, of Israel. So it's this time of grace and favor. That's also what St. Paul means when he says this is the day of salvation, right? What is he saying? He's not just saying like the day on which I'm writing this book is the day of salvation. He's saying this entire period now is this age, this time, this year, this day of salvation, of grace, right, in which we're living everything that the prophets prophesied. Like in the first reading today from Isaiah, Isaiah says, on this mountain, the Lord of hosts will provide rich food and he will break the bonds of this and that. And you're thinking, okay, what is he talking about? It's like, he's talking about now, right? He's talking about the time when the Messiah comes, which is what we're living, that all that stuff is available to us, again, through Christ, right? Through the sacraments, we have all the things that are prophesied. So, yeah.
I just thought of something.
Yeah.
So then in the Old Testament, then, nobody could be in a state of grace then?
So that's a good question. This is an important kind of thing to talk about. When we say a state of grace, we're talking about in a state of sanctifying grace, which means somebody doesn't have any grave sins on his or her heart that are alienating that person from God, right? So the question then being, could people be in a state of sanctifying? Because normally we say, okay, how are you in a sanctifying grace, state of grace? When you're baptized, of course. And then after baptism, if there's some kind of sin that breaks that state, then by renewing your baptism and confession, right? So the question would essentially be, okay, before baptism exists and before the sacraments exist, could anybody be in a state of sanctifying grace? The answer is yes, they could be, and many were. Part of the answer to the question is, and this kind of goes back to what we talked about before, when you're not living in the age of grace and salvation, right? So if you're living before the time when Christ came, before the sacraments existed, then expectations are different, let's say. Like, it doesn't mean that all those people were totally deprived of God's grace and could never, be in sanctifying grace. No, it just means that it would have happened in a different way, and actually it was more difficult, right? So all that to say, we're living in a time when the ability to be in a state of sanctifying grace is so much more accessible to us through the sacraments, right? So we believe, like Adam and Eve, when they were created in a state of original justice, in a state of sanctifying grace, right? And then through original sin, that was broken, right? And so it's not to say that nobody from Adam and Eve until the coming of Christ could ever, be living in a state of, think about somebody like Abraham, right? Who found favor in the sight of God, right? Or many of the other, the prophets, right, of the Old Testament. The great saints of the Old Testament, right? They were living in a state of, they had been touched by God's grace and were living even before, the sacramental life of the church existed, and the church visibly existed as we know it today. They were living in a way that was, touched by God, right? But the means of the sacraments didn't exist yet. Now it's much easier for us, right? We don't have any excuse, is another way of putting it. Like, we have no excuse to, because it's right there. We can go to the sacraments wherever we want to. Good question though. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
is that why Jesus descended into hell, to rescue them to get there, because there wouldn't have been a purgatory?
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a state of, they're living according to what is available to them. Let's say at their period, meaning before the sacraments exist, or whatever. They're living a life of a just life, touched by God's grace. Right. They're doing everything they should be doing. So therefore, they can, when they die, they're gonna be going to heaven. Right. But there's this period of waiting, of expectation for the fullness of what heaven is, which comes after the death and resurrection of Christ. As that's what's referred to as, the harrowing of hell, as it's said, which doesn't mean necessarily that they're in. The word that we usually use is Hades, meaning like sort of not necessarily hell, the state of hell, but kind of in this period of essentially expectation of waiting for the fullness of heaven, sort of like purgatory, but and then Christ would bring them into that fullness after they are after he rises. Yeah. Yeah. Pat?
Indulgences. I always feel like I'm playing a show game.
Yeah.
When it says you do this, you get 500 years off of purgatory,
Yeah.
whatever that means. And I guess I've developed a distaste,
Yeah.
and it comes from like a remembrance or knowledge about what specifically, since time isn't the same in heaven.
Exactly. Yeah.
Somebody should be saying that this equals what on earth.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't understand why we have indulgences, because
Yeah.
it's
Indulgence is basically, it's a good question. Indulgence is basically just an extension of praying for those who have died, the souls in purgatory. So we have a practice obviously in the Catholic Church of praying for people that have died. When we're praying for somebody who died, what are we praying for? We're praying for the people that are in purgatory. So, which is a state of waiting, of expectation for heaven, right? So somebody who's going to purgatory is assured they're going to heaven, but there's further purification that needs to happen so that soul can enter into the fullness of God, right? Another way of putting this is, when we die in a state of grace, right, meaning we don't have any, mortal sins in our heart, we can be assured that we're going to be, going to heaven. But even though we might be in a state of grace, right, when we commit sins, even if they're absolved, right, in confession our sins are absolved, our sins still cause damage in the world and in ourselves and others. And there's that needs to be made up for, right? And that's what penances are in confession, right? We're absolved of our sin, so we're not, liable for that. But there's still some damage because of our sins, and so that's what the penance is about, right? And so either we're going to do that penance in this life, or we're going to do it in purgatory, right, to prepare us for entrance into heaven. Now, we pray for the souls that are in purgatory, partly because it's what the scriptures teach, right? We're told that our prayer for those who are in purgatory will actually lessen the time that they are there, right? Now, this also goes to another question, which is what you just asked about, which is the whole idea of like time in purgatory, which is like, how does that, because we're talking not necessarily about a physical place so much as a state of being, right? Now, there's various, it's a big, as you can imagine, it's a big theological question of like, how could there be, time? Now, purgatory in a certain sense is kind of in this like liminal state between, heaven and earth. So there's a certain state of, certain sense in which time and place may play a role there. Yes, but yeah, there is a sense of we're there for the time that we need to be in order to be purified. And so we pray for those who are there so that their time can be lessened in some way. Now, what is an indulgence? Basically, again, it's an extension of this. It's basically the church. So you think about all the saints that are in heaven, right? All the great saints who are in heaven who are praying and praying and praying for us here below, and also praying for the saints for the souls in purgatory, right, for their purification. There's great power in the intercession of these saints. And of course, we're called to go to those saints and to ask them to intercede. But the teaching of the church has always been that the what we call the merits of the saints. So the saints who are praying in heaven, the power of their prayer is so great and so vast, and we don't really access it in the way that we should. So it's almost like saying there's sort of like a leftover merit of the saints that are praying for us in heaven, right? That we should be accessing, that we should be turning to. And an indulgence of the church basically saying is basically applying to a person or to a soul the treasury, what we call, of merits of the saints in heaven to that particular person, right? So it's basically the church saying, there's all these saints in heaven, or these particular saints in heaven that are praying, and that are, through the merits of their prayer, have great, grace on offer. And here, we're going to give that to you. We're going to apply that to you, apply it to that person, apply it to that soul, so that again, that person's time in purgatory can be lifted. So it's basically the same logic as praying for, it's just like we would pray for somebody who's in purgatory or pray for somebody who's died. It's like the church basically sort of doing that for us, right? We might offer some prayers, we might do some good work, and the church is saying, because of that, you're going to be able to now access, or somebody that you love is going to be able to access this treasury of merits that's stored up with the saints in heaven. And that is on offer to us in a special way during a Jubilee year, as we'll probably talk about more eventually, for those who will, it's sort of like the scapular, there's particular expectations that are tied with it, right? For going to making a pilgrimage, for going through a holy door, right? For offering certain prayers that are associated with that because of that, the church can apply to us or to our intentions the merits of the saints that are in heaven for the good of those souls that are in purgatory. So yeah, more.
Well, isn't also the merits of Christ, blessed Father? It's all, but just like those merits are applied when we receive confession.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's a wonderful sort of clarification, which is to say, the merits. When we talk about the merits of the saints, we're talking about the merits of Christ, right? Because it's Christ who's working through. It's the grace of Christ to which they were open that's working through them. So whenever we're talking about anything that's good of the saints, or even the power that the saints have, right? The power that the saints have to intercede and to bring on behalf of Christ, certain things to us, that all comes about only because of the grace of Christ. Yeah.
We can also get indulgences for ourselves.
Yes.
I'm not sure everybody understands that.
Yeah, we can apply it for for souls that are in purgatory, and also for ourselves in a way of, anticipating,
But
the.
what's interesting to me is you can't get it for your wayward son or daughter.
Mm.
You can't do that. I think that's so interesting. You can only do it for yourself or for the souls in purgatory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a wonderful.
You can pray normally, but an indulgence per se.
Yeah, you can certainly pray.
That's why I got so one night. I probably aren't as crazy as I am, but one night, I'm praying for the souls in purgatory. Going to St. Gertrude and all, and then this one gives 500 years. Oh, this one gives 700, and I'm like, no, they're still in the book. So I know, well, fine, but I'm just saying to you, that's where I get like, are you kidding me? So I just say to the Lord, because He's the one who makes the decision anyway.
Yeah.
I offer anything that happens to me to you to give as you wish.
Yeah.
But I did one night. I'm telling you, I'm going from page to page, and it's like, this is insane. This can't be true.
So what? So what it comes down to, though, is think about it this way: it's the church. The church is the one who we believe in the authority of the church. We believe in what the church was founded to do, right? And the church has a role in dispensing, is the word to use, in dispensing these amazing graces and gifts to people, and also has a role in applying certain certain expectations or certain limitations to that. In the same way, think about this, which might help you with understanding how this works. In the same way that a priest has the authority through the church to apply certain penances to people, right? Now, some people might say the same thing you're saying about the indulgences, about penances. They might say, oh, the fact that a priest can just say, oh, you say 3 Hail Marys, and you say 10 Hail Marys, and you say 5 Hail Marys, and it seems kind of arbitrary from the outside, right? But what is it? It's the church, the authority of the church being expressed in the person of the priest, right, to apply a certain penance to a soul. And it's not just applying that penance to the person, it's also saying that the reason that there's a difference in the penances is because it's the priest saying, this is what you need in particular to allow you to make up for the damage of sins, so as to be, again, prepared for and purified for heaven. So the church has the role to assign these numbers, whether it's amount of time and that's remitted in purgatory, whether it's amount of things that we need to do in this life so as to prepare for that time. That there is that role in dispensing, and again, it can seem arbitrary from our perspective, but it just comes down to what we believe about the role the church has in in,
I think they
for our good.
discontinued the use of the days and the time after Vatican II. They stopped printing that on things. We may have old prayer cards, that sort of
Yeah.
say that. But essentially, I understood.
Yeah, certainly the church at times has, maybe moved away from stressing that so much, but it still exists because the reason it exists is because it can, right? Because the church has that authority, right? The church has the authority to make those kind of stipulations for our good.
Looking to get, I think it's 10.
Manual of indulgences.
Yeah. So if you're, and Pat, do you want to say something
Yes,
about?
please,
Yeah.
I just wanted to, I just want to make sure that you clarify the distinction between the penance that's given for the particular confession as part of our contrition and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and the temporal punishment that's due to sins, that's the harm, the reparation part,
Mm-hmm.
because that's accruing, okay? That's the time, whatever, again, I'm going to use the word time in the sense we all know it, to be purified so that we can basically receive the beatific visit. We have to be completely pure, and that means that we can expect purgation, which is what you said. To your point about the indulgences, I don't want to slide over this because that emphasized the reality of the duration, and I don't mean in earthly time, I just mean maybe severity or that this is serious, because it should impress upon us the role that we have while we're living, walking, and breathing, and we're people of faith, to apply indulgences through our prayers, okay, especially the partial and plenary indulgences that are, like there's one for the December 8th coming up, under conditions of, the conditions, the 8 days confession, free of sin, etc. Don't squander those because we all have family members that have lapsed. You can apply it to yourself, but I pay it forward. I figure if I'm praying for all these people, they're going to remember me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm getting at? But I wanted to say one brief little anecdote, which really, when I first learned this 20 years ago, really impressed upon me this whole temporal punishment. There's a dialogue that Lucia had with Our Lady of Fatima. It was like the first apparition. And when she said, I'm of heaven, was what Our Lady responded. Oh, well, we go to heaven too. Yes. And she points out that 2 of them will be soon, and that one is say. And then she asks about 2 of her friends. Oh, yes, one of them's there. Oh, Amanda, she'll be there till the end of time. So don't kid yourself into thinking that this isn't real, that it's for our benefit, and that it can be mitigated by the efforts of the faithful in anticipation and in knowledge. Because too few Catholics understand this. This is a sort of bad catechesis. And it's very, I think, consoling, if you will, to realize that we have that opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So everybody can look up indulgences and start get the
500
manual of
years.
indulgences.
Stack them up.